Park City, Utah right now. It is freezing cold. The altitude, the temperature, the nonstop of festival life and event producing has me pretty depleted. I had about 7 events in the course of 2 days that I had to produce and execute. So I found strength from, I don't know where we find our strength from. I mean, I know for sure the Lord is a big source of my strength, but I got through it. I'm headed back to sunny LA tomorrow, and I can't wait to kind of just thaw out. But I wanted to talk to you guys about MS and fertility. It's something that I wasn't really expecting to really kind of think about. I don't know why. I guess my mind just didn't go there, but then it did. And I realized that I was 35 years old at the time, and I still might want to have kids, not sure. It was kind of this maybe question mark, something I kind of always put off, or just had kind of in the back of my mind, something I'd look at later. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I haven't yet found a relationship with a guy that I just feel like I want to have kids with. So it's this world is insane enough as it is. I don't want to do something like that if I don't feel it with that person. So it's hard to get your mind there. I don't know. That's what some of my friends have said too, that maybe if they were in a relationship that warranted those feelings, they'd have a little bit more of that maternal kind of instinct. But anyway, I decided I was going to go ahead and freeze my eggs last fall. And I think because I had so many of my friends that had done it, I just figured it would be pretty easy. Most of my friends that had the experience, flying colors, walked away with 20 eggs or 40 eggs, and they're on ice, they can just relax. And I'm let me just do this so it can just be off my plate. It was something I had been thinking about doing for my 35th birthday, but I then got diagnosed with MS at 34, and things, just kind of did a complete, upheaval where I wasn't kind of in that headspace. I was just trying to figure out this disease, figure out if I was going to get on medicine or if I was going to try a holistic route. So it just went to the back burner. And so with things having settled down a little bit and me coming to terms with MS, I was okay, let me kind of get back to the things that I had pushed aside. And one of them was an egg retrieval. So I had done some research and had seen that, MS patients, women with MS, infertility drugs, infertility hormones can kind of heighten our risk of flare-ups. And so that was something that I knew was kind of a flag. So I did my research and found a reproductive partners group that focused on, helping people that had autoimmune diseases, maybe taking a look at dosages and things like that to try to limit, the chance or possibility of you having a flare-up. So I was okay, this should be easy. Let me head on in. So I found Dr. Carrie Wambach at Reproductive Partners Group in Beverly Hills, California. I will have their info up, at the end of this show in case you are in LA or if you want to make an appointment or just get some information. She's amazing. It was a great consultation. I was super excited. And the first thing you do when you go is an ultrasound. And they basically want to take a look at your uterus and see what's happening in there. And what they're looking for are follicles. Follicles are what are going to create your eggs. So someone in their mid-30s, they're usually looking for about 8 to 12 follicles. That's kind of what's considered a healthy standard. So funny enough, we do my ultrasound and there's literally nothing there, not one follicle. And they like to use the term quiet. They like to say, oh, it's really quiet there today. That's interesting, and so you're just kind of freaking out because you're looking at the screen, you don't know what you're looking for, but you see that it's completely dark. So you kind of know that can't be right or what it should be. It was very jarring. It just wasn't something I think that I had mentally prepared for. I think I just assumed it would be just like all of my other friends' experiences. And so I really hadn't prepared myself to receive some type of news of it being quiet or that there was nothing there for her to see. And it really shook me. It really upset me. Whether that was a rational emotion or not, it definitely had me pretty upset. And she said that in some cases, women with MS or anyone with a chronic illness, your body kind of goes into like preservation mode where it shuts down things when it knows that you're not healthy to kind of protect you in a sense. With MS patients, you can see a trend of women heading into early menopause. It's tricky because, and I have my notes here just to kind of like run through what I found in my research, because I don't want you to think that like I'm an expert on this. This is just like the things that, like I found. And it doesn't really say that MS causes infertility. If you go to the National Multiple Sclerosis Foundation's website, it says that fertility and MS are not tied or related or deal with each other, at all. The only note that Science Daily has said is just that women with MS, are at an increased risk of disease activity when reproductive hormones are being put into our bodies, which kind of contribute to just messing with our immune system. And that's really kind of all I was seeing when I first did my like precursory search. And then I decided to just dig a little bit deeper. I started searching for MS and menopause, and that's what really popped up a lot more, in the search engine, and seeing the early onset menopause that happens with women with MS. And so it turns out that that is what I am currently going through. And so my Dr. Wambach really was just so amazing because she calmed me down. She told me that there was a way that we could go about this. It was going to be a little bit of a longer road. We might not get more than one egg, but that we were going to kind of wake me up and stimulate me and, and like kind of get me going. And also to remember that I had been on birth control for the past 5 years. So it made sense that things would be a little quiet. So we began a really mild kind of hormone routine because, again, we're dealing with two things of like, yes, we want to produce eggs. We want to kind of inject or, take the medicine that's going to make those things speed up. But then we're dealing with my MS and making sure that I don't have a flare up. So she had to be really strategic and thoughtful about like what that dosage was going to be. And it was a tough kind of cocktail that we had to kind of keep playing with. And so we started me on September 30th, 2019. We started me with just a very low dose of estrogen, 2 milligrams. I was supposed to take it every day. And then a lot of like prenatal vitamins, CoQ10, vitamin D, which people with MS have a deficiency of that, as you already know. So I keep kind of keeping that routine going and just kind of taking this estrogen every day. And I was supposed to come in every week to see, just like how things, were coming along. So for, I would say, about 3 weeks, there would still be no new changes on my ultrasound. No follicles, nothing to see. It was a really trying time. I know that fertility issues in general is something that we don't talk about that much, but I think that as women, we feel like it's our fault or that something's wrong with us when we aren't producing what's required, for us to be able to bear children. It was just a very hard mental time to go into the doctor's office every week, to lay down and look at a screen and continue to see nothing there when you're thinking that you're taking your pills, you're taking your vitamins. You're like, why isn't this working? What am I not doing or doing to where like this isn't happening? When we got to October, Dr. Wambach was starting to get a little, concerned. She just felt like we had been on the estrogen long enough. I had been off of birth control long enough that we should have seen something. But luckily, thankfully, I finally got my period. It took about 6 weeks and it only lasted a day and a half, but I did actually have a period. And that is when things really started moving inside. I went in for an ultrasound while on my period and then after, and then we finally started to see some follicles. We saw one follicle, and Dr. Wambach went straight into, we've got to make this, we got to get an egg. Like if it's just one, this is what we have to do. So everything shifted to where I went on Clomid or a clomiphene regimen, where you take that at night right before you go to sleep. And that is what really kind of like kicks things into gear and gets things growing, gets the follicle moving. And at that point, once you're on that, you go into the fertility doctor maybe every 3 or 4 days, because it's so time sensitive that if the follicles wind up releasing an egg before they can retrieve it, you're back at square one. So you're kind of just keeping an eye, making sure it's not growing too fast. If we need to increase, the Clomid, just kind of like figuring out like what it is that you're supposed to do. And so by the time I was on the Clomid, it was almost Thanksgiving, and I was going to be traveling for work as well as the holiday. And it was just the worst timing because I needed to be going into my fertility doctor every 3 or 4 days, as I had previously said. So it was, what can we do? What's the game plan? I wound up reaching out to friends of mine that were also in the reproductive realm, whether one was an OBGYN, another one was a fertility doctor, and they actually agreed to see me while I was traveling and send a report back to my doctor about where things were at. Luckily, everything kept growing. Things were moving right along. I got ramped up to moving to Sertratide and Gondal, which are the actual injectables. And I'm telling you, putting a needle into yourself, I mean, obviously I know people that are diabetic, other people that go through in vitro, this is like a thing. It was the freakiest thing I've ever done, ever. I just don't think you mentally want to stab yourself. And these needles are ridiculously long. And it has to go literally inside of you, and you have to do it yourself. That was 2 shots twice a day, going back into the doctor every other day to kind of see, what was happening. And finally, I wound up with 3 follicles, and it was time to give myself a trigger shot, which you can't give yourself. So my best girlfriend, Whitney, came over at midnight on Thanksgiving to give me a shot in my ass of Novarel, 10,000 units. And so I had the trigger shot. It was time for me to do an egg retrieval within 24 hours. It happened, I felt like it took so long. It took 2 months to get to that point. But then when we got there, it just felt like it was just happening too fast. And I became so anxious and nervous that, like, was this going to work? Were these eggs going to be viable? Was something wrong with me to that level where even these eggs wouldn't be, okay? And the egg retrieval itself went really smooth. I think maybe it's 20 minutes, and you go to sleep and you wake up and you have no idea what happened. There was barely any pain. For sure, the easiest thing I've ever done, but then you just have this anxiety and this worry while you wait to see if your eggs are okay. The doctor came out to tell me that he was able to get all 3 eggs out, but that they were premature and they weren't sure if they would be viable, but that they have a system where they kind of can bake, the eggs a little bit and to try to get them to be healthy. And it takes a couple of days, and then they make a determination on if they're viable or not. And so you just kind of have to sit and wait for that call. And it's, all of this energy, all of this time, worrying about having a flare, worrying about, are you going to have any eggs? And then now you're wondering if after all of this, were they even viable? And so these are all of the things that are kind of going on, in my head over the course of those 48 hours. And so I am so blessed and so fortunate because all 3 of my eggs are viable and they are on ice. I'm just over the moon. I didn't have a flare. I was able to keep all of the MS symptoms at bay. And I know now if I do want children biologically, I can have them. And I have additional in case something doesn't work out. I have 3. So it was just such an amazing kind of like end to that little period of my MS journey. We get so much bad news all the time. Either whether it's bad news or I don't know, or I don't believe you, or it's not that bad. It felt really good to have like a win, So I've just been holding on to that, and it's something that gives me hope in so many other ways that I know that I'm going to have more wins than losses, and I'm choosing to claim that victory right now. And I definitely took that with me here into 2020. And I wanted you guys to just kind of hear about that side of it. If you're going through it, this is just my journey. I'm not saying that it'll be yours. I know several people that are happily pregnant or just had kids with MS. So it's nothing to be doomsday or super worried about, but it is something to be aware of and to kind of just like check in. If it is something that you want, take that fertility consult, just get the information, see where things are at for you, especially if you're over 35. Knowledge is power. Just get the information. And so that's kind of how I want to close this out, is to talk to you guys about information and what is happening in 2020. And I was actually looking at the New York Times article that came out at the end of last year that was talking about all of the new state by state kind of fertility guide of like where you have coverage and where you don't. So I'm just going to run through it, and then I'll also have this up so that you can take a look at it and also go to the link on the New York Times. But what was really interesting, I'm gonna obviously can't go through every single state, but I'll pull out the really interesting ones. Being from Chicago, of course, I wanted to see what Illinois had kind of going on. And so in Illinois, any insurer that covers a pregnancy also has to cover IVF. And it also includes 4 completed egg retrievals. And if you have a live birth, then 2 more towards another child. So it's really something that's interesting. If you have an employer that covers, you having a baby, they have to cover your IVF. So look into that. New York, this is a new update. As of January of this year, 2020, insurers have to cover IVF. If you have an unexplained infertility, you have to wait a year without conceiving before you can get coverage, unless you're 35 or over. In that case, you just have to wait 6 months. But fertility drugs, fertility preservation are covered. So that's freezing your eggs. That's your medicine that you're taking. I would say my fertility drugs probably cost around $4,000. So this is saying here that they cover those for you. And there can be no discrimination on the basis, of whatever it is that you're trying to get these fertility drugs for. That it's something that they have to do, and that started literally this month. So those of you that live in New York, get to it, get to changing things around. I'm kind of calling out, my special places and where I've lived. So I used to live in DC. Looks like in Maryland, insurers that cover pregnancy also have to cover IV. If you think you are infertile, you've got to wait about 2 years before you can get any, coverage. But once you do, you get a maximum of $100,000 in coverage to help with your fertility treatments. And it also allows for female same-sex couples to be covered for IVF. So for the LGBTQ community, Maryland is really supporting that. And it also gives you 6 attempts at artificial insemination. And if those have failed, it also will give you coverage for donors. It's really interesting, all of the different coverages state by state. California, I'm really disappointed in because insurers do not have to cover infertility services, but they have to offer them, which I thought was a little bit confusing. And so I looked a little bit further. And so what it is they have to at least give you the resources, I guess, but they don't have to actually provide any coverage. I can tell you for a fact, my insurance did not cover any of my egg retrieval process, and I live in Los Angeles. So it's not the greatest in California. Hopefully they will step on up. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted you guys to just be more informed on, and to make sure that you know what your options are, whether it's financially, with insurance, just being aware for my MS warriors that early onset menopause is something they are seeing. It's not something that's been noted or reported as a trend, but this is the snowflake disease, and we all have different experiences with it and different symptoms, and so this could be one of yours. I hope not, though. Keep the faith, take the wins when you get them, and hold on to them and keep them with you. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.